The breaking point. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Accord hung suspended in the void between stars, a monument to 10,000 years of civilized discourse. Ambassador Calith of the Verenti Collective adjusted his sensory tendrils, preparing for what he assumed would be another routine session of humanity's endless patience. He was wrong. Across the circular table, Ambassador Elena Kovac sat with her hands folded, her dark eyes tracking each council member with an intensity that made Calith's chromatophores flicker involuntarily. Something was different today. The human woman's usual warm smile was absent, replaced by a flat, neutral expression that somehow felt more dangerous than any weapon. The 73rd session of the Resource Allocation Committee will now commence, droned Chairman Vexer, his mandibles clicking in bureaucratic rhythm. The insectoid leader's compound eyes gleamed with the usual dismissive glint he reserved for the younger species. We begin with the continued debate regarding Sector 447's mineral rights. There is no debate, Elena said quietly. The chamber fell silent. In 3 years of service, the human ambassador had never interrupted the chairman, never raised her voice, never deviated from the endless, mind-numbing protocols that governed every microsecond of council interaction. Vexer's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement. Ambassador Kovac, you are out of order. The speaking cue. The speaking cue, Elena continued, her voice still eerily calm, has denied humanity the opportunity to address this theft for 16 months. The cue is no longer relevant. Calith felt his dermal patterns shift to alarm colors. Around the table, representatives from a dozen species shifted in their seats. The human couldn't be serious. The protocols were sacred, the foundation of everything that prevented the galaxy from descending into chaos. Theft. High Magistrate Thorin of the Zelker Dominion laughed, a sound like grinding stones. The reptilian being's scales rippled with condescension. Humanity was granted observer status only 40 cycles ago. You do not dictate. Sector 447 contains the remains of the colony ship Persistence, Elena said, standing slowly. 17,000 human souls who died when their generation ship suffered catastrophic failure 200 years ago. The wreckage orbits a dead moon, and according to the treaties humanity signed in good faith, grave sites are considered sovereign territory. Ancient history, Vexer chittered. The Verenti Mining Consortium has already begun stripping the hull for titanium, yes. Elena's hands remained at her sides, but every human in the observation gallery had risen to their feet. Begun processing the frozen remains of our ancestors as biological waste. We asked you to stop. We filed the proper forms. We waited in your queues. We did everything your protocols demanded. Calith wanted to speak, to defend the consortium's legal position, but something primal in his evolutionary memory warned him to remain silent. The human woman's stillness was the stillness of a predator calculating distance. And now, Elena said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I'm going to tell you what happens next. Not ask. Not request. Tell. Chairman Vexer rose to his full imposing height, his thorax inflating with outrage. The audacity. Security, remove this. The lights died. In the sudden darkness, emergency systems bathed the chamber in dim red illumination. Calith's sensory organs detected something impossible. Every single electronic system in the station had just shut down simultaneously. Communications, life support, defensive systems, even the basic gravitational stabilizers were offline. Only the backup lights remained, and a single holographic display that materialized above the center of the table. A human face appeared in the projection. Male, older, with gray hair and eyes that held the cold calculation of a being who had looked into the abyss and found it wanting. Good evening, Council, the face said. I am Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's Third Fleet. You're currently sitting in a dead station. No power. No shields. No weapons. No communications with your homeworlds. Thorin's scales had gone pale. This is an act of war. No, Admiral Webb replied. This is an act of patience finally exhausted. For 3 years, Ambassador Kovac has played by your rules. She smiled while you delayed votes that would save human lives. She sat quietly while you parceled out star systems that humanity discovered first. She used the proper forms when you decided that treaties only mattered when they benefited the elder species. The hologram shifted, showing a tactical display of the region around the council station. Calith's organs went cold as he recognized the dozens of red dots surrounding them. Human warships. Everywhere. The politeness switch, Webb continued, has been turned off. Not because we enjoy violence. Not because we're the monsters your entertainment feeds claim we are. but because we've learned something about this galaxy. Kindness without strength is called weakness. And weakness gets you killed. Elena remained standing, her expression unchanged. Sector 447 mining operations will cease immediately. The remains of the Persistence and her crew will be returned to human custody. The 16 human colonies currently facing administrative delays in receiving critical medical supplies will have those shipments cleared within the hour. You cannot make demands of this council. Vexor's voice had risen to a shriek. I'm not demanding, Elena said softly. I'm informing you of reality. You have 1 hour to comply. After that, Admiral Webb will demonstrate what happens when humanity stops caring about your opinion of us. The hologram flickered. We brought flowers to a knife fight, Webb said. We tried being the civilization you claim to respect. But respect, we've learned, is something you only grant to species that can reduce your worlds to glass. He leaned forward. We would prefer not to. We came to the stars hoping to find friends, partners, fellow travelers in the grand adventure of existence. His expression hardened. But if all you understand is force, then force is what you'll receive. 1 hour, Council. Choose wisely. The hologram vanished, leaving the chamber in dim red silence. Kaleth looked at Elena Kovac and finally understood the predatory grace he'd always sensed beneath her diplomatic facade. Humans hadn't been weak. They'd been holding back, believing that civilization meant something to the species who claimed to embody it. That belief, he realized with dawning horror, had just died. And something far more dangerous had taken its place. The mask falls away. High Magistrate Thorin's claws scraped against the stone-like material of the council table, creating a sound that would have made any prey species flee in terror. It had no effect whatsoever on Ambassador Kovac. You understand, Thorin hissed, his vocal sacs inflating with barely controlled rage, that this action will unite every species in the galaxy against humanity. You will be branded as aggressors, warmongers, a plague to be exterminated. Elena finally smiled, and Kaleth wished she hadn't. It was the smile of someone who had run the calculations and accepted the answer. Magistrate, let me tell you a story from Earth history, she said, walking slowly around the table. The council's security had tried to enter when the power failed, but the doors remained sealed. They were alone with her. There was once a man named Miyamoto Musashi, a legendary swordsman. In his final years, he wrote that the ultimate strategy was to win without fighting. She stopped behind Kaleth's chair. He fought every instinct telling him to run. But he also wrote that when fighting becomes inevitable, you must strike with absolute commitment. No hesitation. No mercy. No half measures that leave your enemy able to strike back. Her hand rested briefly on Kaleth's shoulder, not threateningly, but the weight of it reminded him that humans were heavy world species, far stronger than their appearance suggested. For 3 years we tried the first way. Today you're learning about the second. This is barbaric. Counselor Sapphira of the Lumini Confederacy's crystalline form resonated with harmonic distress. We are civilized beings. We have protocols, procedures, established methods for resolving. You have bureaucracy, Elena interrupted. You have structures designed to ensure that the powerful remain powerful and the newcomers remain grateful for whatever scraps their throne. You mistake complexity for civilization and delay for wisdom. She walked back to her position but didn't sit. Behind her, the observation gallery windows showed the blackness of space, and the running lights of human warships maintaining position around the station. Chairman Vexor's mandibles worked silently for a moment before he could form words. You speak of protocols failing, yet you ignore the most fundamental law of the Galactic Accord. Disputes are resolved through discussion, not force. Really? Elena's eyebrow raised. Tell that to the Mirathi. Oh wait, you can't. The Virenti Mining Consortium wanted their world, and when the Mirathi protested through proper channels, their sun mysteriously became unstable. 30 billion people dead, and the investigation has been ongoing for 7 years. Kaleth's chromatophores flashed bright yellow, shock. The Mirathi incident was classified, buried under layers of council security protocols. How did the humans know? Tell it to the Krishna Collective, Elena continued, her voice gaining an edge. When they refused to hand over their agricultural technology, suddenly pirates, using weapons that just happened to match Zelker Dominion specifications, raided their shipping lanes until their economy collapsed. Now they're a protectorate, which is a lovely word for subject state. Thorin's scales rippled, but he remained silent. Should I continue? Elena asked. Because humanity has had 3 years and virtually unlimited computing power to analyze every decision this council has made for the past century. We found the patterns. We cracked the codes. We know exactly how you maintain power. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table. You allowed us into the Galactic Accord because you thought we'd be like the others. Grateful. Compliant. Too afraid of being isolated to challenge the established order. And when we started asking uncomfortable questions, you did what you always do. You delayed, obstructed, and waited for us to learn our place. The lights flickered once, still red, still emergency mode. But humans are good at learning, Elena said softly. We learned that your treaties are only enforced against the weak. We learned that your courts rule in favor of whoever has the most economic leverage. We learned that your much-vaunted civilization is just another empire that's learned to smile while it crushes anyone who threatens the status quo. If you truly believe that, Counselor Sapphira chimed, her form dimming with what might have been sadness, why did you stay? Why continue the diplomatic fiction? Elena's expression softened slightly. Because some of us still hoped we were wrong. Because humanity desperately wanted to believe that we'd finally found what we've dreamed of since we first looked up at the stars. A community of minds, diverse species working together for mutual benefit and advancement. She straightened. But then you started dismantling the persistence. Processing our dead like industrial waste because the titanium in the hull was worth more to you than our grief. And we realized that you don't have lines you won't cross. You just have costs you're not willing to pay. The chamber remained silent. Outside, one of the human warships drifted closer, its weapons arrays clearly visible in the dim starlight. The difference, Elena continued, is that humans do have lines. We've crossed some of them in our own history, and we carry the shame of those crossings in our cultural memory. We know what we're capable of becoming if we abandon our principles. Her eyes swept across the council members. But we also learned that principles without power are just pretty words waiting to be betrayed. So we built the fleets. We perfected weapons we hoped we'd never use. We planned for the day when being polite stopped being viable. 53 minutes remain, Admiral Webb's voice echoed through the chamber, transmitted through means Calith couldn't identify with dead systems. I have warships in position over every homeworld represented in that chamber. I want to be clear, we don't want to use them. But we will. Vexor's voice had lost its imperious edge. You would murder billions over a salvage dispute? No, Elena said. We'd go to war over the principle that sentient beings have the right to honor their dead. That treaties mean something. That civilization requires more than just strong preying on the weak while hiding behind parliamentary procedure. She pulled out her chair and sat down, crossing her legs casually. But here's what's really going to happen. You'll comply with our immediate demands because you have no choice. Then you'll spend the next few months trying to build a coalition to put humanity back in its place. You'll discover that half the younger species have been waiting for someone to challenge the established order. You'll find that some of your loyal allies have been quietly building their own fleets, inspired by humanity's example. Elena smiled again, warmer this time but no less dangerous. And eventually you'll realize that the choice isn't between the old order and chaos. It's between real civilization, where rules apply to everyone, and the slow collapse of a system that's been rotting from within for generations. Calith found his voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Today? Compliance with our immediate demands. Long term? Elena looked directly at him. We want the Galactic Accord to mean something again. We want a civilization worthy of the name. And we're willing to fight for it, even against people who should have been our friends. The red emergency lights cast long shadows across the chamber, and in those shadows, Calith saw the death of everything he'd believed about galactic politics. The age of protocol had ended. And humanity had just shown them what came next at the cost of civilization. Counselor Sapphira's crystalline form pulsed with a deep indigo light, the Lumini equivalent of profound distress. Her species had shepherded the Galactic Accord through 4,000 years of relative peace, and now she watched it crumble in real time. Ambassador Kovac, she said, her harmonics carrying a weight of centuries, do you understand what you're destroying? The Accord has prevented 17 major wars, facilitated peaceful contact with 247 species, and established a framework that has allowed atrocities to continue as long as they're committed slowly and through proper channels, Elena interrupted, but her voice held no anger towards Sapphira. With respect, Counselor, I've read your species' founding texts. The Lumini built the Accord because you believed that communication and understanding could replace violence. I admire that. Humanity shares that dream. Sapphira's light shifted toward violet, curiosity mixed with confusion. Then why this? Why throw away diplomacy for threats? Elena stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the human fleet. Because you forgot your own principles. The Lumini texts speak of justice tempered by mercy, and truth spoken in all forums. When did those ideals become secondary to maintaining stability? Before Sapphira could respond, a smaller side door hissed open. Everyone turned to see a figure stumble into the chamber, Junior Attaché Ryloth of the Tarnashi delegation, his feathered crest matted with what looked like coolant fluid, clutching a datapad like a lifeline. Magistrate Thorin, Ryloth gasped, I managed to reach the secondary communications array. The human fleet, it's not just here. They're everywhere. The young Tarnashi's tablet projected a galactic map that made Kalitha's organs clench. Red markers indicated human ships in over 300 systems simultaneously. Impossible, Vexor whispered. Our intelligence indicated humanity had at most 80 capital ships. Your intelligence, Elena said calmly, saw what we wanted you to see. Humanity has been preparing for this moment since we first decoded the Marathi black box data 2 years ago. The one that recorded their sun's collapse in detail. The one that showed Virenti frequency signatures in the destabilization pattern. Thorin's scales had gone completely pale. That data is sealed under Accord security protocols. Accessing it is a violation of law? Elena laughed, a sharp sound without humor. Yes. So is genocide, but that didn't seem to bother anyone. We broke your laws to uncover your crimes, Magistrate. And we've been preparing ever since. Ryloth looked between the council members and Elena, his crest feathers drooping. The human ships, they're not attacking. They're just sitting there in orbit. Waiting. 47 minutes, Admiral Webb's voice interjected. And I want to clarify something for everyone listening to this transmission. And yes, Magistrate, we are broadcasting this to every major population center in the Council territories. Kalith felt his chromatophores flash panic colors. Broadcasting Council proceedings was forbidden, designed to prevent mob rule and populist uprisings from. Oh no. We're not here to conquer, Webb continued. We're not here to impose human rule or extract tribute. We're here because the system is broken, and broken systems don't fix themselves from within. They require external pressure. On Rylotha's tablet, text began scrolling, messages from across the galaxy. Kalith leaned closer to read them, and what he saw made his sensory organs retract in shock. The messages were from ordinary citizens of the Accord species. Thousands of them. Millions. They were cheering. Citizens of the Virenti Collective praise humanity's courage, Ryloth read aloud, his voice shaking. They're sharing suppressed documents about consortium corruption. There are protests forming outside the Virenti Parliament building. More messages cascaded across the screen. Zelker junior military officers are refusing orders to mobilize against human ships. They're demanding an investigation into the Kreshna pirate attacks. Rylotha's eyes widened. There's a mutiny in the Third Dominion fleet. Thorin lurched forward, grabbing for the tablet, but Ryloth stepped back. The young Attaché's crest rose slightly, defiance from a species that had been client-state subjects of the Zelker Dominion for 3 generations. Tarnashi citizens are calling this the Day of Unveiled Truth, Ryloth continued. They're demanding treaty renegotiations. They want. He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. They want sovereignty. Elena remained at the viewport, but Kalith could see her reflection. Tears tracked down her face, though her voice remained steady. This is what I meant, Counselor Sapphira. The Accord didn't fail today. It's been failing for centuries, one compromise at a time, one covered-up atrocity at a time, one rigged vote at a time. We didn't break civilization. We just showed everyone that it was already broken. You're triggering galactic chaos. Vexor shouted, his usual composure completely shattered. Multiple species rising up simultaneously, demanding changes. This is how empires fall, how entire regions descend into warfare. Yes, Elena said simply. It is. And sometimes that's necessary. She turned to face them fully. My great-grandfather fought in Earth's last world war. 80 million dead. Cities turned to ash. He spent the rest of his life working for peace because he'd seen the alternative. But you know what he told me before he died? Elena's voice softened. He said that the war happened because good people chose stability over justice for too long. Because the cost of fighting seemed too high, until suddenly the cost of not fighting became impossible to bear. Sapphira's light had shifted to a deep, sad blue. You're gambling with billions of lives, Ambassador. No, counselor. You've been gambling with them for generations. We're just calling the bet. Elena walked back to the table. Here's what you don't understand. Humanity studied every fallen civilization in our history before we reached the stars. We know the patterns. We know how systems collapse. She placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. The Accord was already dying. You could feel it, couldn't you? The increasing unrest, the younger species becoming harder to control, the economic strains as your elder species tried to maintain privileges that were becoming impossible to sustain. You were headed for collapse anyway, we're just controlling the detonation. 38 minutes, Webb announced. I'm now going to share something with the Council. We have evidence, communications, financial records, tactical data, of every major crime committed by the elder species over the past 2 centuries. Everything. The Marathi genocide. The Krishna economic warfare. The deliberate technological suppression of 17 developing species. The assassination of Ambassador Yellen of the Korati Union when she got too close to exposing the truth. The chamber had gone deathly silent. We could release all of it right now, Webb continued. Let the galaxy tear itself apart in rage and recrimination. Or, Elena said quietly, you can choose to let the Accord become what it was supposed to be. An alliance of equals. A forum for justice, not just order. A civilization that earns the loyalty of its members instead of demanding it through coercion. Calith finally found his courage. And if we refuse? If we call your bluff and dare you to carry out your threats? Elena met his eyes, and he saw something there that made him understand why humans had survived everything their death world had thrown at them. Then we won't have to do anything, she said. Because in 37 minutes, when we release all that evidence to every citizen in the galaxy, your own people will tear down the Accord for us. The only question is whether it falls into chaos or gets rebuilt into something better. She sat down one final time. Choose, Council. Choose quickly. Because humanity is done being patient, and the galaxy is done waiting for you to develop a conscience. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, bearing witness to the moment when everything changed. The tipping point. 29 minutes. Chairman Vexer's mandibles clicked in a rapid staccato pattern that Calith recognized as deep cognitive processing. The insectoid leader's compound eyes had dimmed, individual facets focusing and refocusing as he calculated odds, measured outcomes, weighed possibilities. You're forcing us into an impossible position, Vexer said finally. If we comply under threat, we appear weak. Every species with a grievance will see this as precedent, as permission to arm themselves and make demands. The entire structure collapses. It was going to collapse anyway, Elena said. We're offering you the chance to manage that collapse instead of being swept away by it. From his seat in the secondary ring, Junior Attaché Ryloth was still monitoring incoming transmissions. His tablet chirped constantly now, unable to keep up with the flood of messages. Counselor Sapphira, he said hesitantly, I'm receiving communications from the Lumini homeworld. Your own people are demanding transparency. There are demonstrations in the Crystal Gardens. Sapphira's form flickered, shock overlaying distress. The Crystal Gardens hadn't seen protest in 3 millennia. Her species prided themselves on reasoned discourse and peaceful resolution. What have you done? She whispered to Elena. We told the truth, Elena replied. We sent out a single broadcast 3 hours ago before this meeting began. Basic facts. Timeline of suspicious events. Questions that have never been adequately answered. We didn't even include the classified data. We let people use their own judgment. And they judged us guilty, Thorin growled. Your propaganda? Wasn't propaganda, Elena interrupted sharply. Every single piece of information we released can be verified through public records. We didn't lie, Magistrate. We didn't exaggerate. We didn't manipulate. We simply presented facts that you've spent decades ensuring no one looked at all together. Calith's dermal patterns had shifted to contemplative gray. His mind raced through implications, probabilities, historical precedents from both Virenti history and the human databases his staff had analyzed. You planned this for years, he said slowly. The patience, the politeness, the perfect diplomatic behavior, it was all set up for this moment. Elena nodded. When you're the newcomer, the outsider, you have 2 choices. Accept the system as you find it or change it. We chose to try the first path honestly. We really did hope that patient engagement would lead to reform. But we prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't. You're a hunter species, Calith continued, understanding crystallizing. You think in terms of stalking, positioning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. You made yourselves seem harmless while you learned everything about us. Actually, Elena said, something like respect entering her voice, we learned that from you. The Verenti Mining Consortium uses the same strategy. Enter a system claiming minimal resource extraction, build infrastructure, establish economic dependence, then gradually increase your take until the local species has no choice but to accept your terms. You're very good at it. We just applied the principle to diplomacy. Vexer's mandibles stopped clicking. You studied us. Our tactics, our weaknesses. Every species represented in this chamber, Elena confirmed. We identified what you value, what you fear, what makes you act or causes you to hesitate. Humans are good at pattern recognition. It's how we survived on a planet that kept trying to kill us. 22 minutes. Rylotha's tablet chimed urgently. Council, I'm receiving an emergency transmission from the Tarnashi Prime Minister. He looked up, his crest feathers quivering. She's requesting permission to address the chamber. Denied, Thorin snapped. This session is sealed and override accepted, Elena said calmly. The holographic projector above the table activated again, showing a Tarnashi female whose crest was marked with the platinum bands of high office. Prime Minister Kasara looked directly at the camera, but her words were clearly directed at Thorin. Magistrate, for 70 years the Tarnashi people have accepted Zelker dominion, protection. We paid our tribute, provided resources at favorable rates, and sent our young to serve in your military. We did this because we believed in the Accord, believed that cooperation was better than conflict. Her crest feathers rose into full display, challenge posture. But we've now seen the evidence the humans have compiled. The Kreshna attacks used Zelker weapons. The Marathi sun was destabilized by Verenti mining technology. The economic policies that keep young species dependent aren't protective, they're exploitative. And the worst part, Magistrate, is that we suspected. Deep down many of us knew. But we were afraid to stand alone. Kasara's image turned to face Elena. Ambassador Kovac, the Tarnashi people formally petition humanity for a defense pact. If the Accord falls or if retribution is attempted against your species, you will not stand alone. Before anyone could respond, Rylotha's tablet erupted with notifications. I'm receiving similar transmissions from the Korati Union, the Stellar Nexus Federation, the Kreshna Collective Remnant Government, and... He scrolled frantically, 73 other member states. They're all requesting human alliance. The chamber erupted in chaos. Treason. Thorin roared. You're tearing apart. Nothing that wasn't already broken. Kasara shot back, her broadcast still active. The younger species have been comparing notes, Magistrate. Privately. Carefully. We've known for years that the system was rigged, but we lacked the strength to challenge it. Until now. Sapphira's form had shifted to a strange pattern Kalith had never seen before. Multiple colors swirling, unable to settle. This is worse than I feared, she said softly. Elena, you haven't just challenged the Accord's leadership. You've given permission for everyone to choose sides. This is the prelude to civil war. No, Elena said, standing once more. It's the prelude to choosing what kind of civilization we want to be. Counselor, your species founded the Accord on noble principles, but somewhere along the way those principles got lost. They became slogans used to justify maintaining the status quo. She walked to stand beside Sapphira's hovering crystalline form. The Lumini texts speak of civilization as the perfection of mutual aid. They say that power exists to serve all or it serves none. Those aren't just pretty words. They're the foundation of everything the Accord was supposed to be. But they've been buried under layers of realpolitik and bureaucratic inertia. Sapphira's colors began to stabilize, settling into a contemplative purple. You're quoting our own sacred text to indict us. I'm reminding you of what you already know, Elena replied gently. Your species has been uncomfortable with the direction of the Accord for centuries. I've read the Lumini internal debates, the ones your representatives fought to keep confidential. There are factions within your government who want reform, who recognize that the current system betrays everything your ancestors built. 15 minutes, Admiral Webb announced. Council, I'm going to show you something now. Something we hope will clarify the situation. The holographic display shifted, showing a star chart. Kalith recognized it immediately. It was the Torgessa Expanse, a region that had been declared a demilitarized zone 3 centuries ago after a devastating war between the Verenti and Zelker nearly destroyed 12 inhabited systems. 3 days ago, Webb continued, human long-range scouts discovered this. The image zoomed in to show a massive military installation hidden within a nebula at the Expanse's heart. Ship construction facilities, weapons platforms, supply depots. Enough military hardware to conquer a dozen star systems. Joint Verenti-Zelker construction, Webb said. In direct violation of the Demilitarization Treaty. Best estimates suggest it's been under development for 30 years. Our analysis indicates it was intended as a staging ground for the next phase of elder species expansion, into territories currently held by younger Accord members. Calith felt his chromatophores go completely white, fear. Thorin and Vexor exchanged glances, and their silence was more damning than any denial. You see. Elena's voice cut through the shocked silence. This is why we chose to act now. We didn't stumble into confrontation. We didn't let emotion guide us. We gathered evidence, built alliances quietly, and prepared for the moment when we could force the truth into the open before the elder species were ready to act on their plans. Ryloth had stopped monitoring his tablet. He simply stared at the projection, his crest completely flat. Tarnashi shock response. You were going to invade us, he whispered. All of us. The protection was just preparation for conquest. Lies. Vexor hissed. That installation is a research facility, authorized under. There are no authorized research facilities in the Torgessa expanse, Elena said calmly. We checked. We filed Freedom of Information requests. The records were either deleted or never existed. Which means even your own bureaucracy wasn't trusted with the truth. She turned to address all the council members. This is the choice before you. Not whether to give in to human demands, those are just the catalyst. The real choice is whether to continue down a path that ends in subjugation of half the galaxy, followed by inevitable rebellion and war. Or to step back from that precipice and build something better. 10 minutes, Webb said. Choose wisely. The stars outside the viewport seemed to hold their breath, waiting. The old guard fractures. Counselor Sapphira's crystalline form suddenly brightened, casting rainbow light across the darkened chamber. When she spoke, her harmonic voice carried frequencies that Calith had only heard once before, when a Lumini elder had declared a binding philosophical position before the entire Confederacy. Ambassador Kovac, Sapphira said, I invoke the first principle. Every member of the council froze. The first principle was ancient law, predating even the Accord itself. It stated that when confronted with irrefutable evidence of systematic injustice, any member of the Lumini could unilaterally act to restore balance, regardless of political consequence. Thorin's scales rippled with fury. Counselor, you cannot. I can and I am, Sapphira interrupted, her voice resonating with absolute certainty. The evidence presented is clear. The Marathi genocide, the economic warfare, and now this secret military installation. These actions violate the founding principles of the Accord. As a Lumini representative, I am bound by oath to acknowledge truth when it is revealed. She turned her crystalline form to face Elena fully. Humanity's immediate demands are granted. The Sector 447 mining operations will cease within the hour. The medical supply delays will be resolved. And I formally propose an emergency tribunal to investigate all allegations presented here today. Vexor leaped to his feet, or what passed for feet on his insectoid body. This is outrageous. The Lumini cannot unilaterally overturn council decisions. The Lumini, Sapphira replied, her harmonics carrying steel, founded this accord. We have watched for 4 millennia as it slowly corrupted from an alliance of equals into an oligarchy of the strong. No more. The humans are right, we lost our way. And it ends now. Calith watched his political worldview shatter in real time. The Lumini had always been the Accord's moral center, the species everyone assumed would maintain stability. If Sapphira was breaking ranks? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chiming from Rylotha's tablet. The young Tarnashi's eyes widened as he read the incoming message. Counselor Sapphira, Ryloth said, his voice trembling, I'm receiving a transmission from the Lumini Confederacy High Council. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The holographic display activated again, showing an assembly of crystalline beings in what Calith recognized as the Lumini's central deliberation chamber. The speaker was ancient, their crystal form etched with age marks that indicated they'd been alive when the Accord was founded. I am Elder Luminax, the ancient Lumine said, their harmonics carrying across light years with perfect clarity. We have monitored this council session with great concern. We have also independently verified the evidence presented by humanity regarding systematic violations of Accord principles. Luminax's form shifted through colors rapidly, the Lumini equivalent of deep emotion. The Confederacy stands with Counselor Sapphira's invocation of the first principle. Furthermore, we formally declare that the current Accord structure has failed its founding mandate. We call for a Reformation conclave, the first in 2,000 years, to rebuild our civilization on foundations worthy of the name. Thorin's voice had lost its commanding edge, reduced to a desperate rasp. You're destroying everything we've built. No, Luminax replied, their ancient voice somehow gentle despite the revolutionary words. We're destroying what we allowed ourselves to become. There is a difference, Magistrate. 8 minutes. Vexor's mandibles worked frantically. Caliph could see the chairman's mind racing through scenarios, calculating political angles, searching for some way to salvage the situation. But the mathematics of power had shifted too dramatically, too quickly. The Verenti Collective, Vexor said finally, cannot accept these demands. To do so would be to admit guilt for crimes we did not commit. We will withdraw from the Accord rather than submit to this coup. Elena's expression didn't change. That's your right, Chairman. Though I should mention that Admiral Webb has shared the evidence regarding the Marathi genocide with your own people. All of it. Including the communications showing that the operation was authorized by the Collective's high command without consulting your citizen assemblies. Vexor's compound eyes widened fractionally, the closest his species could come to showing shock. Your government lied to your people, Elena continued quietly. They committed genocide in the Collective's name, knowing that if the truth came out, it would shatter the unity your species prizes above all else. How long do you think you'll remain chairman once your citizens process what was done without their knowledge or consent? Rylotha's tablet was now a constant stream of notifications. Chairman Vexor, the young Tarnashi said hesitantly, I'm seeing massive protests forming on Varentia Prime. Your capital city it's filled with demonstrators demanding transparency and investigations. For the first time since Caliph had known him, Chairman Vexor looked old. The weight of centuries seemed to settle on his thorax as the reality penetrated. His own people were turning against the system he'd spent his life maintaining. This is chaos, Vexor whispered. Everything will fall apart. Perhaps, Sapphira said, her voice compassionate despite everything. Or perhaps something better will grow from the ruins. Change is frightening, old friend, but stagnation is death. Caliph felt his chromatophore shifting through colors unconsciously, confusion, fear, hope, determination, all flickering across his dermal surface. His own Verenti identity warred with what he'd learned today. The consortium he'd proudly represented was built on genocide and theft. The Accord he'd believed in was a pretty lie hiding ugly truths. But there was something else, something he'd felt growing throughout this impossible day. Relief. Ambassador Kovac, Caliph said, his voice stronger than he'd expected, I have a question. Elena turned to him and he saw no triumph in her eyes. Only exhaustion and sadness. What happens now? Caliph asked. You've torn down the old system. What do you build in its place? Elena smiled and this time it reached her eyes. We don't build it. We all do. That's the point, Caliph. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We're not interested in replacing one empire with another. She gestured to the viewport, to the human ships holding position in the darkness. Those ships aren't an invasion force. They're a statement. We're strong enough to demand a seat at the table, but we're not interested in flipping the table over. We want what the Lumini wanted 4,000 years ago, a genuine alliance of equals working together because it benefits everyone, not because the strong force the weak to comply. Idealistic, Thorin muttered, though his scales had lost their aggressive coloring. He looked defeated, diminished. Maybe, Elena admitted. But humans learned something important from our own history. Cynicism is easy and it leads nowhere good. Idealism is hard, requires constant work and compromise and accepting that you'll never build a perfect system. But it's the only path to building anything worth having. 5 minutes. The Zelker Dominion, Thorin said slowly, each word seeming to cost him, will cooperate with the proposed investigations. We will accept responsibility for our actions regarding the Kreshna situation. His eyes met Elena's and Caliph saw something unexpected there, respect. You outmaneuvered us completely, Thorin said. Not just militarily or politically but philosophically. You made it impossible for us to maintain the old order without revealing ourselves as the very tyrants we claim to oppose. It's masterful in its way. It wasn't about being masterful, Elena replied. It was about being thorough. And patient. And willing to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. Ryloth suddenly stood, his crest feathers raised high. Ambassador Kovac, the Tarnashi people wish to formally thank humanity. Not just for today, but for showing us that we didn't have to accept oppression as the price of peace. His voice cracked with emotion. We were so afraid. For so long we convinced ourselves that submission was wisdom, that accepting our place was maturity. But you showed us that dignity matters. That some things are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible. Elena's eyes glistened. You're welcome, Attaché. But the real courage will be in the days ahead. Rebuilding is always harder than destroying. 2 minutes, Admiral Webb announced. Council, we're receiving your compliance signals. Mining operations in Sector 447 have ceased. Medical supply routes are being cleared. The Lumini Confederacy has formally called for a Reformation conclave, and 70% of Accord member species have already signaled their intention to participate. Webb's holographic image allowed himself a small smile. It appears, Ambassador Kovac, that the galaxy was ready for this conversation. They just needed someone to start it. Elena walked back to her chair and sat down properly for the first time since the session began. Calith noticed that her hands were shaking, the only sign of the tremendous stress she must have been under. Chairman Vexer, Magistrate Thorin, Elena said formally, I want to be clear about something. Humanity doesn't hate you. We don't want revenge or retribution. We want accountability, yes, and justice for those who've been harmed. But more than that, we want partners. Real ones. She looked around the chamber at each council member. Every species here has something valuable to contribute. The Verenti are masters of resource management and engineering. The Zelker have military discipline and strategic brilliance. The Lumini bring philosophical wisdom and long-term thinking. Even humanity's contribution, our pattern recognition and synthesis of different approaches, only matters in the context of learning from all of you. 1 minute, Webb said quietly. So here's what I propose, Elena continued. We spend the next year in intensive reform discussions. We examine every aspect of how the Accord functions and rebuild it based on principles that actually work. Not the ones we wish worked, but the ones that account for all our species' nature, including our capacity for selfishness and domination. Sapphira's form glowed softly. A Reformation conclave hasn't produced a new Accord structure in 2 millennia. It could take years. Then it takes years, Elena replied. Good civilizations aren't built quickly. They're built carefully with input from everyone who'll have to live within them. The countdown reached 0. The lights came back on. Power flooded back into the station systems, everything returning to normal function as if the blackout had never happened. Through the viewport, the human warships began slowly withdrawing to a more distant position. Still present, still watching, but no longer threatening. Calith realized he'd been holding his breath and released it slowly, his chromatophores settling into a cautious green-blue, hope mixed with uncertainty. Well, Vexer said, his voice carrying a strange mixture of defeat and relief, I suppose the 74th session of the Resource Allocation Committee will be quite different from the 73rd. Despite everything, Calith found himself laughing, a chittering sound that set off a round of relieved responses from around the chamber. Even Thorin's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. The age of protocol had ended. The age of reformation had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same. The ripple spread. 3 days after what the galactic networks had started calling the Revelation event, Ambassador Elena Kovac stood in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic station, watching news feeds from across the galaxy. Sleep had been scarce, but adrenaline and a sense of cautious optimism kept her alert. Her personal calm chimed. Admiral Webb's face appeared, looking as exhausted as she felt. Ambassador, you need to see this, he said without preamble. Elena's screen split, showing simultaneous broadcasts from multiple worlds. What she saw made her heart race. On Varentia Prime, the collective's high command had stepped down en masse. Interim leadership announced immediate elections, something unheard of in Verenti political history, where positions were traditionally hereditary based on consortium affiliation. The Zelker Dominion's military was in chaos, but not the destructive kind Elena had feared. Junior officers had formed oversight committees, demanding civilian review of military operations. Magistrate Thorin had been placed under house arrest by his own people pending investigation. And everywhere, across hundreds of worlds, younger species were holding celebrations. Not riots. Not violence. Celebrations. It's spreading faster than we projected, Webb said. The Nexus Federation just announced they're opening their archives. Everything classified for the past 2 centuries. The Korati Union is demanding reparations from the Verenti for economic exploitation. And the Tarnashi. He pulled up another feed showing Prime Minister Kasara standing before a massive crowd in her capital city. We are no longer subjects, Kasara declared, her crest feathers in full display. We are no longer dependents. Today, the Tarnashi people declare ourselves a sovereign and equal member of the galactic community. We owe humanity a debt of gratitude, not for freeing us but for showing us we could free ourselves. Elena felt tears threatening again. This was what they'd hoped for but hadn't dared to believe would happen so quickly or so broadly. There are some problem areas, Webb cautioned. The Verenti Consortium leadership is talking about forming a breakaway coalition. Some Zelker military units are refusing to stand down. And there are at least a dozen smaller species trying to use the chaos to settle old grudges. Expected, Elena said, wiping her eyes. Change is messy. The question is whether we can keep it from turning into bloodshed. A soft knock on her door interrupted them. Elena opened it to find Calith standing there, his chromatophores displaying a complex pattern she'd learned meant respectful request for audience. Ambassador, may I speak with you? The Verenti diplomat asked. Of course. Admiral, I'll contact you later. Webb's image vanished and Calith entered, his posture showing unusual hesitancy. For a being whose species communicated partly through color and pattern, he seemed to be struggling to express something difficult. I resigned from the consortium today, Calith said finally. Effective immediately. Elena gestured for him to sit. I'm sorry. I know how much that position meant to you. Did it? Calith's colors flickered through several patterns rapidly. I thought it did. But these past 3 days I've been reviewing my entire career. Every decision I defended, every compromise I made in the name of stability and order. And I realized that I was just complicit. He looked at her directly, his dermal patterns settling into honest gray. I helped dismantle the persistence. I signed off on the paperwork. I knew there were remains aboard, but the consortium assured me they would be properly processed. I didn't ask what that meant because I didn't want to know. And that cowardice, that willful blindness, makes me as guilty as those who gave the orders. Elena sat across from him. Calith, I don't think. Please, he interrupted. Let me finish. I need to say this. He took what passed for a deep breath in his species. When you revealed everything in that chamber, my first reaction was anger. At you for disrupting everything. Then shame for being part of it. Then fear because I didn't know who I was if I wasn't a consortium representative. But now... His colors shifted to something Elena had never seen before, a pale gold that seemed to glow from within. Now I feel free, Calith said quietly. The weight of defending the indefensible is gone. And I want to help. Whatever the reformation process needs, whatever it takes to build something better, I want to be part of it. Elena smiled. The Reformation Conclave is going to need voices from every species, especially those who understand how the old system worked. Your experience would be invaluable. Even though I was part of the problem? Especially because you were part of the problem, Elena replied. We need people who understand the temptations, the rationalizations, the slow compromises that let good beings do terrible things. That knowledge is how we design systems that resist corruption. Calith's colors brightened slightly. Hope. I've been thinking about what you said. About humanity studying its own history, learning from its failures. Would you share some of that history with me? I want to understand how your species learned to recognize and resist the patterns we fell into. Before Elena could respond, an urgent alert chimed on her comm. She accepted the call to find Counselor Sapphira's crystalline form projected in miniature. Ambassador Kovac, Delegate Calith. Good, you're both there, Sapphira said, her harmonics carrying urgency. We have a situation developing in the Tertian system. It's complicated. The projection expanded, showing a star system Elena recognized from the briefings. Tertian Prime was home to a species called the Korath, one of the younger races that had seemed enthusiastically supportive of humanity's actions. The Korath have just announced they're using the Reformation as justification to settle a territorial dispute with the neighboring Helixan species, Sapphira explained. They're claiming that the old Accord rulings on their shared border were imposed by elder species bias and should be null and void. Elena's stomach sank. Are they mobilizing? Both sides are. The Helixan claim the Korath are using Reformation as cover for old-fashioned expansion. The Korath claim they're just seeking justice for historical wrongs. And both sides are citing humanity's example as justification. Calith's colors had gone dark with concern. This is exactly what Magistrate Thorin warned about. If the Reformation becomes an excuse for chaos, then we prove we can handle it, Elena said firmly. She looked at Sapphira. Counselor, can you arrange a direct channel between all parties? Already done. They're waiting for humanity's position. Elena stood, squaring her shoulders. Then let's show them what reformation actually means. 20 minutes later, Elena found herself on a three-way holocall with representatives from both the Korath and Helixan peoples. The Korath ambassador, a being named Vreth with scaled features and ridge crests that moved with emotion, was in mid-rant. Generations we've accepted borders that cut through our spawning grounds. The old Accord cared nothing for our biology, only for maintaining their precious stability. Well, humanity showed us that stability isn't worth sacrificing justice for. What justice? The Helixan representative, Ambassador Thylia, was a semi-aquatic being whose translation device carried outrage clearly. You're talking about territory your ancestors lost in fair conflict 300 years ago. This isn't reformation, it's opportunistic expansion. Ambassadors? Elena interrupted firmly. Both of you stop. Silence. Let me be absolutely clear, Elena continued. Humanity did not challenge the Accord so that every species with a grievance could start a war. We challenged it because the system was corrupt, because the powerful were exploiting the weak, and because truth was being suppressed in favor of order. She looked directly at Vreth. Ambassador, if your spawning grounds are truly being affected by the current borders, that's a legitimate concern that deserves serious consideration. But the way to address it isn't by mobilizing your fleet. It's by presenting evidence, arguing your case, and accepting that sometimes you don't get everything you want. Then to Thylia. And Ambassador, if the Korath have legitimate biological needs that weren't considered in the original border agreement, dismissing those concerns because of ancient conflicts isn't justice either. Reformation means being willing to reconsider everything, even decisions that benefit your species. Both ambassadors started to speak, but Elena held up her hand. Here's what's going to happen. The Lumini are convening an emergency border commission specifically to review territorial disputes where biological or cultural needs may not have been adequately considered. You're both going to present your cases to that commission. You're both going to provide full documentation and scientific evidence. And you're both going to accept binding mediation. And if we refuse? Vreth asked, his rich crest rising in challenge. Elena's expression hardened. Then you'll discover that humanity's fleet isn't just for threatening the old guard. We didn't dismantle the Accord's power structure so you could replace it with your own version of might makes right. Reformation requires everyone to act in good faith, or it doesn't work. Caliph leaned forward into the frame. I've reviewed your case files, Ambassador Vreth. The Korath spawning grounds issue is real, but it affects less than 3% of your population and there are several possible solutions that don't require border changes. The old Accord ignored your concerns because processing them would have been inconvenient. But using reformation as cover for territorial expansion is just as bad. Thylia's colors shifted to something more receptive. You really think there's room for compromise? I think there's room for creativity, Elena said. The old Accord was rigid because rigidity benefited those in power. The new structure needs to be flexible enough to accommodate different species' genuine needs while firm enough to prevent exploitation. That's going to require work from everyone. She softened her tone slightly. Look, I understand the impulse. The old system was unfair, so let's use this moment to grab what we can. But that's not civilization. That's just chaos with better timing. Real reformation means building something that works for everyone, which means everyone has to give something up. Vretha's ridge crest lowered slightly. The Korath people are tired of being ignored. Then be heard through the proper channels, Elena replied. Make your case so compellingly that it can't be ignored. Use this moment to prove that younger species can be just as committed to justice as we demand the elder species be. There was a long pause. Finally, Vretha's posture shifted to something more conciliatory. Very well. The Korath will participate in the emergency commission. But we expect our concerns to be taken seriously. They will be, Sapphira's voice chimed in, her crystalline form appearing in a fourth projection. The Lumini Confederacy guarantees it. And Ambassador Kovac is correct. Reformation only works if everyone commits to the process. After both ambassadors signed off, Elena slumped in her chair. Calith's colors had shifted to impressed blue-green. You just prevented a war in 20 minutes, he said. Maybe, Elena replied. Or maybe I just delayed it. The next few months are going to be full of situations like this. Species testing the boundaries, seeing if the old rules still apply or if anything goes now. But you were right about one thing, Calith said thoughtfully. Humanity isn't trying to rule. You're trying to be, what would you call it? A stabilizing force, Elena said. Not the same as the old guard's stability through suppression. More like, we're the voice reminding everyone why we're doing this. What we're building toward. Her calm chimed again. She groaned. I'm beginning to think Chairman Vexer had a point about chaos. But when she checked the message, her expression changed. It was from Admiral Webb. Elena, you need to see this right now. The attached video showed something extraordinary. On Earth, in Geneva where the old United Nations headquarters still stood, a massive crowd had gathered. But they weren't protesting or celebrating. They were watching a live broadcast. The broadcast showed representatives from 247 Accord species, nearly every member state, gathering at the Lumini homeworld for the first session of the Reformation Conclave. And they were displaying a new symbol, a circle of stars representing all member species, with no star larger or more prominent than any other. At the center, where the old Accord symbol had shown the founding species emblems, there was simply an open space. The center remains empty, Counselor Sapphira explained in the broadcast, until we have built something worthy of filling it. Not a symbol of power but of purpose. Not dominance but cooperation. This is the promise of Reformation. Elena watched the crowd in Geneva begin to cheer. Then she checked other feeds and saw similar gatherings on worlds across the galaxy. Humans and aliens together, watching the same broadcast, hoping for the same future. It's really happening, Kaleth said softly. You didn't just force change. You made it possible for people to believe change could lead somewhere good. Elena nodded, too moved to speak. The weight of what they'd set in motion settled on her shoulders, not crushing but significant. They'd started something enormous, and now the hard work of actually building it began. But for the first time in 3 years of frustrating diplomatic service, Elena felt like they were building something real. Something that might actually last. The foundation. 6 months after the Revelation event, the Reformation Conclave had settled into its complex, messy, frequently frustrating work of rebuilding galactic civilization. Elena Kovacs stood at the viewport of the new Conclave station, purpose-built in neutral space, with input from every member species regarding its design. The result was architectural chaos that somehow worked. Crystalline Lumini aesthetics blending with Verenti geometric precision, Zelker military efficiency softened by Tarnashi artistic flourishes, and human modular design tying it all together. It looked like civilization in progress and Elena loved it. Behind her, the main assembly hall was in full session. She could hear the debates through the open door, sometimes heated, occasionally descending into what sounded like arguments but always productive. Real discussions were messy. The old Accord's smooth efficiency had been a symptom of its corruption, not a feature of its success. Ambassador? A young human aide approached, tablet in hand. The vote on the resource allocation framework is about to conclude. They're asking if you want to make a final statement. Elena smiled. No. Let the framework stand on its own merits. The aide nodded and hurried back inside. Elena had learned that one of the hardest parts of Reformation was knowing when to step back, when to let the process work without intervention. Humanity couldn't be the galaxy's conscience forever. Eventually, all species needed to internalize the principles for themselves. You look contemplative. Kaleth emerged from a side corridor, his chromatophores displaying the calm blue-green that had become his default pattern. 6 months ago that would have been unthinkable, Verenti diplomats trained to keep their dermal patterns neutral. Now he expressed himself freely. Just thinking about how far we've come, Elena replied. And how far we still have to go. Kaleth joined her at the viewport. The resource allocation framework is going to pass. 73% in favor by my count. That's remarkable, considering it requires elder species to give up significant economic advantages. Because the framework is fair, Elena said. And because enough citizens across the galaxy are watching to make their representatives think twice about self-dealing. That had been one of the most important reforms. Full transparency. Every vote, every debate, every proposal was broadcast live to anyone who wanted to watch. At first, elder species representatives had hated it. But they discovered something interesting. When ordinary citizens could see the actual reasoning behind decisions, they were often more supportive than politicians expected. You have a visitor, Kaleth said. Chairman Vexer asked if you had time to speak with him. Elena raised an eyebrow. The former Verenti chairman had been noticeably absent from conclave proceedings, and she'd assumed he'd retired to private life. Send him in. Vexer entered a few minutes later, looking smaller than Elena remembered. His compound eyes had lost their imperious gleam, but there was something else there now, something that might have been peace. Ambassador Kovac, Vexer said, his mandibles clicking in what Elena had learned to recognize as respectful greeting. Thank you for seeing me, Chairman. What can I do for you? Former Chairman, Vexer corrected gently. I came to tell you that the Verenti Collective's new assembly has voted to formally apologize for the Marathi genocide and to establish a reparations fund for the survivors who fled to exile colonies. Elena felt her breath catch. That's significant. It's necessary, Vexer replied. I spent 6 months fighting it, trying to argue that it was politically impossible, that it would bankrupt the collective, that dwelling on past crimes served no purpose. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. The new assembly pointed out that those were the same arguments the old guard used to justify doing nothing. They were right. He approached the viewport, looking out at the stars. I hated you, Ambassador. 4 months after the Revelation event, I saw you as the destroyer of everything I'd built. But gradually I began to understand something. You didn't destroy the Accord. You revealed that it had already destroyed itself and we'd just been maintaining the corpse. I never wanted to be anyone's enemy, Elena said quietly. I know. That's what made it effective. Vexer turned to face her directly. You actually believed in the principles. That's what the elder species had forgotten. That civilization requires genuine commitment to shared values, not just strategic cooperation. From inside the assembly hall, a chime sounded. The vote had concluded. Moments later, Councillor Sapphira's crystalline form appeared in the corridor, her colors bright with satisfaction. The resource allocation framework has passed, Sapphira announced. 81% in favor. And more importantly, the debate was constructive. Species found ways to address concerns without obstructing the entire process. Elena felt a weight she hadn't known she was carrying lift from her shoulders. The framework had been a test. Could diverse species with competing interests actually govern themselves fairly? The answer, it seemed, was yes. There's more, Sapphira continued. The Tarnashi delegation has just proposed something extraordinary. They're suggesting that the conclave establish a permanent office specifically for younger species advocacy, funded by contributions from all members, with staff drawn from species who've joined the Accord within the last century. Kalitha's colors brightened with excitement. That would institutionalize the voice of newcomers, ensure they're not marginalized the way they were before. It's brilliant, Elena agreed. And it's exactly the kind of structural reform we need. Not just punishing old abuses but creating systems that prevent new ones. Admiral Webb's face appeared on a comm screen nearby. Ambassador, sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. The Zelker Military Tribunal just released their findings on the Krishna attacks. The screen shifted to show a Zelker court proceeding. Magistrate Thorin stood in the defendant's box, his scales dull with age and stress. The presiding judge, a younger Zelker officer whose rank insignia showed her as part of the reform movement, spoke clearly. Magistrate Thorin, you are found guilty of ordering unauthorized military operations against the Krishna Collective, resulting in economic collapse and millions of deaths through secondary effects. You are sentenced to life imprisonment with all honors and rank permanently stripped. Thorin accepted the sentence without visible reaction, though his scales shifted to acceptance gray. As security led him away, he paused briefly. Let the record show, Thorin said, his voice still carrying authority despite everything, that I accept this judgment. Not because I fear the consequences but because it is just. The Dominion failed the Krishna people. I failed them. And accountability requires more than words. The feed ended. The corridor fell silent. He could have fled, Vexer said quietly. Most of the old guard who committed crimes have disappeared into distant colonies, beyond conclave jurisdiction. Why did he stay? Because, Elena said, understanding dawning, he realized that if the powerful can escape justice, we're just rebuilding the same broken system with different faces. Sapphira's colors shifted to somber purple. Thorin was many things, harsh, militaristic, often cruel. But he was a being of principle, even when those principles were wrong. In the end, he chose to die with integrity rather than live as a fugitive. The galaxy needs to see that, Kalith added. That even those who benefited from the old system can accept the new one. It's a powerful message. Elena's comm chimed with another alert. She was beginning to suspect the universe had a sense of humor about timing. The message was from Earth's diplomatic service. Short, direct, and life-changing. Ambassador Kovac, your request for extended assignment has been approved. You are hereby appointed as humanity's permanent representative to the Reformation Conclave, with authority to continue negotiations for the new Accord structure. Congratulations. Try not to start any more galactic revolutions. She laughed, actually laughed out loud, startling everyone in the corridor. Good news? Calith asked. I'm not going home, Elena said. They want me here, seeing this through to whatever conclusion it reaches. That could be years, Sapphira noted. I know. Elena looked out at the stars again, at the ships from hundreds of worlds moving peacefully through space, at the station where species who'd been enemies for generations were learning to work together. But this is the most important thing humanity has ever done. Not defeating the old guard but building something better. I want to be part of that. Vexor's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The galaxy is fortunate to have you, Ambassador. Even if it took us far too long to realize it. The assembly hall doors opened and delegates began filing out. Elena watched them, Verenti and Zelker standing together discussing the vote, Tarnashi and Lumini comparing notes, dozens of species mixing freely instead of clustering in ethnic blocks. Young attaché Ryloth emerged, his crest feathers raised in excitement. When he saw the group at the viewport, he hurried over. Ambassador Kovac. The younger species caucus wants to meet with you. We're drafting the proposal for the advocacy office, and we'd like humanity's input on the structure. I'd be honored, Elena replied. But I want to be clear, this should be your initiative. Humanity can advise, but you need to own it. Ryloth's feathers rustled with determination. We understand. We're not looking for humanity to lead us. We're looking for humanity to stand with us while we learn to lead ourselves. After Ryloth left, Calith made a satisfied color pattern. 6 months ago he wouldn't have dared speak that way. Now he's coordinating multi-species initiatives. This is what reformation looks like in practice. It's messy, Elena said. All the best things are, Sapphira replied. Her crystalline form brightened. The Lumini have a saying, a perfect system serves no one, for perfection allows no room for growth. The old Accord claimed to be perfect, and in that claim it died. This new structure admits its flaws, and in that admission finds strength. Admiral Webb's voice came through the comm again. Elena, one more thing. Earth wants to know if we should start reducing the fleet presence around Conclave space. Things have stabilized enough that maintaining full military readiness might send the wrong message. Elena considered. The human warships had become a familiar presence, not threatening but definitely there. A reminder that reformation had teeth. Scale back to normal defensive postures, she decided. We made our point. Now we need to trust the process and let the new structures prove themselves. Understood. Webb out. Vexor had been quiet, but now he spoke. That decision, to withdraw the obvious threat, that may be the most important thing humanity does. It shows you're not just replacing one empire with another. We never wanted an empire, Elena said. We just wanted. She paused, searching for the right words. To be heard, Calith finished. To be treated as equals. To live in a galaxy where principles mattered more than power. And to ensure, Elena added, that the mistakes we made on Earth, all the times we let fear or greed or tribalism override our better nature, wouldn't be repeated on a galactic scale. Sapphira's colors shifted to warm gold, approval and affection. The Lumini have watched humanity carefully these past months. We've seen you struggle with the same temptations that corrupted the elder species. The desire to impose solutions. The frustration when others don't listen. The temptation to use your fleet to force outcomes you believe are right. But you've resisted, she continued. You've acted as catalysts, not dictators. You've pushed for justice while accepting compromise. You've shown strength without succumbing to domination. These are the qualities that build lasting civilization. Elena felt tears threatening again, seemed to be a recurring theme lately. We're trying. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I want to just tell everyone what to do because I'm tired of debating the same issues in 12 different committees. That's honest, Vexor said. The old guard would have hidden such feelings, claimed we were above such frustrations. But you admit them, work through them, and come out better for the struggle. Illumini Child 2015. Their species equivalent of an adolescent, approached shyly, accompanied by a human teenager who Elena recognized as the daughter of one of the Conclave engineers. Ambassador Kovac? The Lumini youngster chimed. We're doing a school project about the Reformation. Can we interview you? The human teenager held up a recording device hopefully. Elena smiled. Of course. What do you want to know? Were you scared? The Lumini child asked. When you told the council to stop being polite. Everyone says it was brave, but I want to know if you were scared. Elena knelt down to be at eye level with both children. Terrified, she admitted. I was afraid we'd start a war. Afraid humanity would be destroyed. Afraid I'd be responsible for billions of deaths. Then why did you do it? The human teenager asked. Because sometimes being afraid and doing it anyway is the only option. We tried every other approach. And I realized that living in fear of confrontation was just another way of accepting injustice. The Lumini child's colors swirled thoughtfully. My parent says that's the most important lesson of the Reformation. That civilization requires courage. Your parent is wise, Elena said. After the children left, Elena stood and found the entire group watching her with expressions ranging from respect to something deeper. You know what the real victory is? Caliph said. Not the reforms we've passed or the frameworks we've built. It's that children from different species can work together on school projects, asking questions about justice and courage. That's the foundation of everything else. Elena nodded, watching the children disappear into the crowd of delegates. That's what we're really building. Not just a new political structure but a shared future. One where the next generation doesn't have to fight the battles we fought because we built something strong enough to last. Will it? Vexor asked. Last, I mean. Or will this Reformation eventually corrupt like the original Accord did? Probably, Elena admitted. Nothing lasts forever and every system eventually develops flaws. But that's why we're building in mechanisms for change, for accountability, for course correction. The old Accord's fatal flaw was believing it could achieve permanent stability. We're building something that accepts change as inevitable and tries to manage it constructively. Sapphira's form glowed brightly. The Lumini elders wish to present humanity with a gift. A recognition of what you've given to the galaxy. She projected an image, a memorial being constructed on the Lumini homeworld. It showed a human figure reaching toward the stars, surrounded by representations of all Accord species. At the base, an inscription in every written language. Here stood those who dared to hope that civilization could be more than the strong ruling the weak. Who believed that principles matter more than power. Who showed us that sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to start again. Elena had to turn away, overcome. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. We don't deserve that. We just couldn't accept the alternative. That, Vexor said gently, is precisely why you deserve it. The assembly hall chime sounded again. Time for the evening session. Delegates began filing back in, ready for another round of debates, compromises, and slow progress toward something better. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders and prepared to return to the work. It would be years before the new Accord structure was complete. Decades before they knew if it would truly succeed. Centuries before they could judge whether this moment of reformation had been the beginning of something lasting or just a brief pause in the cycle of power and corruption. But that was okay. Because they were trying. And in a galaxy that had forgotten how to try, that mattered more than any certainty. As Elena walked back toward the assembly hall, Caliph fell into step beside her. Ambassador, I've been thinking. When this is all done, when the new Accord is finalized and functional, what will you do? Elena smiled. Start preparing for the next reform, I suppose. Because there will be one. There will always be injustices to address, systems that need fixing, voices that need amplifying. That's not a flaw in civilization. It's a feature. That sounds exhausting, Caliph noted. It is, Elena agreed. But it's also what makes it worthwhile. The work is never done, so there's always a reason to keep going. Always something to build, always something to improve. They reached the assembly hall entrance. Inside, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy waited to continue the complex, frustrating, essential work of building a civilization worthy of the name. Elena paused at the threshold, looking back one more time at the viewport, at the stars beyond. 6 months ago, humanity had turned off its politeness switch and shown the galaxy what happened when patience finally ended. But today they were showing something more important. What happened when that same determination was channeled into building instead of breaking? When the fierce courage required for confrontation was matched by the quiet courage required for cooperation. When a species decided that the dream of civilization was worth the endless, exhausting work of making it real. Elena Kovacs stepped into the assembly hall, ready to continue that work. The Reformation wasn't finished. But it had begun. And across the galaxy, billions of beings, human and alien alike, watched, hoped, and dared to believe that this time they might actually get it right. The stars bore witness. And the story continued.